What are we going to talk about today? I'd like to start with a couple of quips that I happened to hear when I was passing by Woody Allen's Annie Hall movie. And they're so good that they bear repeating and sort of bear on what we're about to pursue. One thing he said was that it's been discovered about intellectuals, of which I've been since my birth really, that they can be brilliant and have no idea of what's going on. And then he said that dysentery is when commentary and dissent merge. Commentary and dissent merging are dysentery. And some of you may say that what I'm going to talk about as we move forward is a lot of dysentery. And finally, it was being spoken about professors at college being chair emeritus of a particular field, chair of economics in a particular university. And Woody Allen said, 2 more chairs and you'd have a dining room set. So to begin that, I'm going to talk today what I hope is a little more universal than just particular to the date that we're on today, which is, I can't quite remember, it's about January 7th, I guess, today. The 8th today. We're in the month of January, and we're in the season that's been going for many months now of people running for the presidency, the election that's going to come this year in November. And what I'd like to start with is to say that we can see from what's been happening in this election, and particularly, of course, the most amazing and the most sensationalistic and the most emotional side this time through happens to be that of the Democratic field. And we can see that if we use this as a starting point and an analytic point, that the greatest discrimination of all is to women of the world and to women of the United States of America. And we also can see, just as a tangential thought, that we have collective emotions together. We not only have our individual feelings and personalities and conclusions and attitudes, we also have something that swells as a human collective, sometimes more and sometimes less. And you never know at a given time, but we're living proof from what you can see with the candidates and what's happening with the people coming to see them and so on, that we have in us breasts full of emotion that in this time are gelling in particular ways for particular reasons. And we're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be dealing more about the female and woman being the most loathed and despised of all the particular kinds of subgroups and main groups in a population that you can think of. I would remind you here that regarding history, we are not that long away from when women couldn't vote, and we are not that long away from when women really were sort of the chattel of males, their husbands or their fathers, in this country. Let's look at a brief little history. In 1870, the vote or the franchise was put into the Constitution for African American males. In 1884, which is more than a century ago, but not that long ago, there was what's called the Married Woman Property Act, which allowed women, slowly but surely, to be able to have and own property and not have to be at the mercy and ownership virtually of the males that controlled them. By 1900, property rights were pretty much given to women in every state. They were effectively happening. And it wasn't until 1920 that the bird-brained females, including the ditzy blondes with the big boobs, it wasn't until 1920 that women got the vote in this country. So we are not even 100 years away from that. Now, of course, you know that I'm headed towards talking about Hillary Clinton as a case in point for how much we despise and loathe women. And the despising does not come only from males. More interestingly and more poignantly, it comes from females too. Now, I saw recently in the state of Iowa, there was on some business a poster made of Hillary as the Colonel Sanders on a Kentucky Fried Chicken smiling. And the poster said, 2 fat thighs, 2 small breasts, and a bunch of left wings. Think about what it would mean for anybody to even devise, have it in their mind, but more than that, to dare to put it up publicly. How much loathing and hatred would have to be there of not just Hillary, but the female, to put up a poster like that. 2 fat thighs, 2 small breasts, and a bunch of left wings. And you can also see the basis, which undercurrents how she is being judged. It's not the whole story. There is the history. It could be stale, that the Clintons have had so much effect and leverage on this country, so it could be stale. It could be that people are of the anti-regulatory and anti-populist, anti-socialist mode of politics, but it's way more than that. And the so-called sexual gender basis is an undercurrent, if not a foundation, of the entire situation. I also heard somebody say the day after Iowa that somebody or the public or whatever really gave her a spanking. And we know all about women and spanking. We know the Madonna clips about spanking. We know about certain practices in sex to spank females as a big sexual turn-on, I guess, for both parties, whatever. But again, it brings it down to the sexual basis of what's being talked about, that they gave her a spanking and putting a woman in her place. And believe me, women are in their places, they're volunteers for their places, and they have other women helping them to maintain staying in their places. Now, Hillary, of course, has also, there have been articles about this by any kind of persuasion of media, saying that yes, it's true that she has, when you look at the media coverage, received more scrutiny and more criticism than any of the other candidates. It's like she couldn't breathe. For a long time it was, what pantsuit is she wearing? What color is she wearing? She should have had different makeup. Look how good she looks in that light on the commercial, and so on. So there's everything she's been doing has been up for grabs the instant it would happen, and it has been the kiss of death since that first so-called infamous time that she, what they called, made a mistake on the question of whether illegal immigrants could have driver's licenses. It wasn't a mistake, it was very well spoken. But the media latched onto it and considered it sort of like a wedge in something that had been flawless. Now, many of the candidates, as you know, Fred Thompson, who has sleepily said he never even wanted to be president, was one of his statements. Huckabee has made several missteps, as have most of the other candidates at one time or another. Certainly John McCain has said some outrageous things, some nasty things when he's made jokes that aren't so funny. But of course, everyone was waiting for that one place, that very controlled and perfect campaign where she was so bright, and many Republicans were saying, oh boy, she sounded so good at what she was saying. They did admit it, but everybody waiting with bated breath for something they could fell her with, because this ain't gonna happen. Maybe it will, we don't know, but the idea being, to a very large extent, this ain't gonna happen. A woman is not going to lead the country. A woman is not going to tell us what to do, and that's what people see in Hillary. They also see a domineering, cold, hard, factual, pragmatic person who does have her female side, of course, but this doesn't quite sit right. And if she were not this kind of a person, and she were some soft and sweet-spoken person, this would put her out of the running altogether. So it is kind of an impossible situation that you can't fit all the bills and pass through the little hole in the needle's eye. Now, also, it was to such an extent, if you could imagine this, when Hillary was not felled, as she has been in so-called goofs that she's made, which weren't goofs. When she went to Wellesley, when she was still writing okay, and all the girls were screaming and so happy to see her there, and she said, what a great thing it is to be back at Wellesley College, and that this college gave me what it takes as a woman to be a candidate for President of the United States. Truer words never spoken, very true words. And you remember how this was pounced on by the media, that she was pulling the gender card because she was telling them how wonderful it was to have gotten a background like Wellesley to be able to run for President of the United States. Just total truth. And what is wrong with her talking about that, what it takes, and the fact that things have helped for a woman to become president. So again, a very unfair thing for them to have seized upon as if she were playing a gender card, because if there's, she should have used the gender card more. She may not, but if there's one thing she would use it for, it might be for a practical thing, certainly not for an emotional thing. She has no use to use the woman card for on an emotional basis. Now, emotionality too, her cackle, that she's shrill, the sound of her voice when she gets angry. And when you see me talking to you, you may see anger too, because I admire someone like Hillary Clinton. Do I love her? Do I know she has faults? Do I know that Bill has faults? I admire her, and I think as females we would do better to become more like such a role model as Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, that if you like the softer, sweeter side or just the sexual side, it may not suit you, but women stand a long distance to become much more practical and much more matter-of-fact and much more pat about who they are and how they want to live their lives, and mostly not to live their lives as human beings, but to live, not to live their lives as women, excuse me, not to be living their lives as women in the role of a woman, whatever that is, but to be living our lives as human beings. And our lives as human beings include sexuality, include emotionality, include mothering, include nurturing, and hopefully include a whole lot of brains. Not just how to get by in a man's world. Remember James Brown? It's a man's world. How to get by, not brains of how to do that, how to be passive aggressive, how to make your husband do things like pick up his clothes, or listen to you when you talk to him. You know, we even have stereotypes on the television where the male is just sitting there slouched, watching TV, barely listening, and the woman's trying to get him to hear something or do something, and he doesn't. These stereotypes, which are very true, abound. But we need to have more brains to be people, not trying to get by within the framework of a man's world. And this is not to fault men, and this is not to say anything derogatory about men. It's to talk about the fact that women are in a very lowly position, and it continues, and there is a lot of animosity coming right out of the female gender against females. All you have to do, too, is look at some of the shows with young people in them, all the way from Annette Funicello on to 90210 and any of the others whose names I can't think of, and you'll have an awful lot of, what was that, Spelling, Aaron Spelling's work. You'll have an awful lot of the quote-unquote catty females, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with in your own life. Women trying to fell women. So if you have men who aren't your friends and you have women who aren't your friends, they'll be your friends for certain things, and we know what those things are. But we have such a long way to go. So Hillary's laugh, Hillary's forceful tone is considered, difficult to hear. It's considered a cackle. It's considered shrill. And of course, we know the linkage to words like hag, because Hillary is an older woman, hag and witch that go along with this. All these ideas of what a woman is, and the only time really that I can think of, come to think of it, that she's spoken of in labels that are usually given to women that has any kind of positivity to it would be when she's called a mother, and we know what we've done with the word mother too. Okay, now also regarding the media having been so harsh on Hillary, we know about the media taking up the idea that Hillary was proselytizing that she was an inevitable candidate. And if you follow politics for presidential elections, you will remember many times, many people who are candidates have said, they've been asked by moderators, you say you're going to win, you talk as though you are the president already, and they will time and again say, I am going to win. Even if they were at very low percentages compared to the other candidates, they would say, I am going to win, I am going to be president. So this is nothing new. It's a technique, a poor one, I admit, of people talking as though they were already going to be the president. But of course, in Hillary's case, this was seized upon, and she never used the word inevitable, but it was given the word inevitability and used as a slur and something to be hateful towards her about. Now we know that of all the candidates, if you listen closely, Hillary is the sole candidate that has been fastidiously and meticulously explicit to a point that people are like, oh, stop it. Although many audiences that have had private sessions with her, such as the medical profession, for example, come away time and again dazzled, saying she knows more about it than we do, about diseases, about what needs to be done in medicine. She can dazzle you, and she's been training for this all her life to know as much and how to get it done. Now, I'm not saying she would or she wouldn't get it done, but it's almost overwhelming. And in the beginning times before she was so felled, people noticed the great difference in how much she came out with actual things and what the specifics and explicit explanations of what needed to be done and how it would be done. So anyway, there you have it. That doesn't matter a heck of a lot, because way more overwhelming is the supposed coldness, the supposed bitchiness, the supposed domineeringness, the supposed hardness, the shrillness, and boy, and the idea of too large thighs and too small breasts, and it ain't going to pass through the eye of the needle. Maybe it will, we shall see, but it's a good case in point for the degree to which women are loathed. When Hillary started to turn up the heat in New Hampshire recently, a commentator said, this is what she had to do, and then asked, but was she attractive doing it? No, ladies and gentlemen, it ain't that attractive to have a female telling you what she's going to do in no uncertain terms with an iron fist in a hard, cold way. That's not going to happen. Was she attractive doing it? Does she have to be attractive? Does she have to be knowledgeable? Can both things coexist? Can she be a female at all? And if she weren't the pragmatic, very knowledgeable, very able under pressure kind of female, she wouldn't be a candidate whatsoever, because you can't have a candidate for president who isn't very hard and able to withstand tremendous pressure. Then today I saw on the internet, on the very famous Drudge Report, one of their center photos that takes the lead of just Hillary's lips with lipstick and the wrinkles on her I can't think of what's this called, above her lip. I forgot what this is called. But that kind of a photograph, the lipstick and the wrinkles, and that's another factor about the female and age. First of all, the female should be attractive, should be beautiful, should be sexy, should be young. And that still goes on, that's changing, should be young. And her age is another thing being held against her and being spoken of a lot of times by commentators when she's in different lighting, different outfits, and so on. Then we have today, the Boston Herald shows Hillary. They take, you know how we can do this, we can take a still of something totally unrelated, like surprise or whatever, and they have her in this shot of great whatever, and they call it panic. And they want to make her look like a fool. Now, do they do this to other people? Certainly they do. They do it to Britney Spears, and they did it to the blonde who died recently. I can't remember her name, that everybody cared about. And they've done it to Michael Jackson. They just look for any way to make him look like a fool, to make him look bad. But we can say that Michael Jackson fits in the feminine side. He does have a very feminine way about him, so maybe he fits in this whole thing about felling people and making them look like fools, as is now being done to the female candidate Hillary. They want to pillory Hillary. I think a good new name would be Pillory for Hillary. And you know, I don't listen to all commentators, but I do listen to several when I'm in my car. And there is a spokesperson that's very well regarded on one of the stations who has forever been calling her fat ass, whore. This is considered reputable spokesperson. Satan, he is referred to her as Satan. That's his favorite word for her. Can't say enough to dig her into the ground, to refuse her right to exist, to refuse her right to be a full-fledged female with ideas, with goals, with motivation, with fervor, and with determination. How shameful is this, that women call that same program and think nothing of saying boo about a female being referred to this way, no matter who she is. And like I say again, if men don't favor to let you pass through the eye of the needle, if there are, you have to be your own person no matter what happens, and this will be probably maybe the great lesson for Hillary. She will have to go on. It'll be a great burden for her to carry. But you are where you are in life, and you can't fault people. You can point things out, but you have to become who you are, the human being, not the woman. You have to become who you are as best you can within the circumstances that you live. And this idea of women women becoming more full-fledged human beings has been churning for quite a while, but not for that very long while. The suffering has been eternal, goes back from time immemorial, and all people have suffering no matter what gender they are, but the suffering and the perverted psychology of females acquiescing to the dynamic that exists about females goes on. Now, this Satan, this harpy, this hag, this witch, this cackler, this shrill person, this domineering bitch, and this is what she's been called in many households across the United States, no big secret, wanted health care for everybody, and is the only one to have the program that would give health care across the board, and also defies the HMOs and has given lectures that we must get rid of the HMOs without giving, per se, the anti-corporate spiel. So if you've ever been sick, and sometimes, and many times, you work very hard, you work all the hours you're given full-time, and you work more than that, and you still can't afford health care. And if you've ever been sick, which many of you are or have been, and you cannot access health care, you know what an immoral sin that is. So is that such a very bad thing? Health care for all. Satan wanted health care. And the person who called her Satan, fat ass, big thighs, every vulgar thing. They might have toned him down along the way because he seemed to have limited his words for her as time went on. Also didn't like the fact that she would bring about more of a socialistic trend, and you know that is true. But the main thrust against her, because the person who is getting all the votes now certainly has a similar flavor to his platform, all the people and so on. He has a similar flavor going on. So it's not quite only that is the factor going against her. And by the way, this health care is so important, and if you have yours, you are very lucky. But it's really immoral and unfair that people wouldn't be able to access health care on a general basis and when they are sick. And many of you might have seen recently the TV show host Glenn Beck, who is very outspoken, and they call him right-wing, I guess. He makes some very poor conclusions. In my opinion, his logic, not so much his point of view, but the logic is flawed a lot of times. But anyway, you've probably seen that he's made that video of how they botched a surgery, maybe they did or didn't, and he was railing against the hospital. And this is very critical. It's critical for people also who even have health insurance. Do you realize how many people are having cancer, and how many people are waiting for results that don't get called about the results in a timely fashion, or can't have their treatments done in a way that keeps them stress-free, predetermined, and organized, because the healthcare system is so overburdened, or that 100,000 people die annually in hospitals from errors being made, or that there are germs, that there are bacteria out in the hospitals that are and in laboratories that do research on animals, germs that are going into the culture at an alarming rate, and new kinds of diseases over which there is no control. So our health care, and anybody that says, oh, we've got the greatest, we're better than England, we're better than Canada, our health care is in a crisis. And when the physicians came to the session of Hillary about health care, which was specific to them, they couldn't agree more. They themselves know that we're desperately in need of some changes, mammoth changes to how the healthcare system is worked, and really only a national system can fit the bill and help what ails us. And you know what? No matter who becomes the president, whether it's someone from the Democratic side or someone from the Republican side, by the way, did you notice how the Republicans have managed to get the IC off the word Democratic? They now refer to the Democratic Party as Democrat. It has a more sound to it. They say Republican and Democrat Party, instead of, as it had been forever, Republican and Democratic. This is similar to what was done by Ronald Reagan in the 80s when he made that glorious, beautiful word liberal a dirty thing, and something that took on a whole new meaning. He worked hard on that, and they succeeded. Now they call it the Democrat Party. But whomever it is, there will be, of necessity, new regulations coming in, and we need national regulation on so many things in this country. We need it on the airlines. It's becoming impossible. We need it in healthcare. It's becoming impossible. We need it on water. We need it on air quality. We need it on the miles per gallon in the cars. And no matter what, it's going to become so inevitable, it's going to be absolutely necessary. Of course, there are people with platforms who specifically are ready for that, and those that will come to it of necessity, depending on who becomes the president. Now also, even I saw a little video of Hillary recently where she was explaining that, you know, it's too bad that people don't like her. It's hurtful to her. And yes, sometimes she does get excited and she does seem emotional, and that if women are this way, we have to get used to it. I heard Hillary explaining that. And this is true. I mean, this is what it is about being human being human, whatever it is. If you get emotional, or it sounds emotional, or it sounds shrill, that's who you are. And if women are more sensitive, and if that is dangerous, so be it that we would get more compassion, that we would get children's issues, healthcare issues, veterans issues, that we would get people's issues out of more compassionate and sensitive, so to speak, personalities. So be it. This is not such a scary thing. It's really time to get rid of. It's time to get rid of hitting people, punching people, knocking them down, brutalizing them as much as possible, having revenge, shooting them, blowing them up. It's really time for a change. Now, in my own personal life, I don't have to go far to find people that can't take Hillary as a candidate. Many of the females that I know in my personal life don't accept Hillary, are very turned off by her for one reason or another. Wonder even why she was running. How could that be? Not even having seen how she prepped herself pretty much from the day she was born to do something. This is what's in her blood. And you remember how Hillary said, "I don't bake cookies." And as a tangent to that, I'd like to say, today, interestingly, Mitt Romney's wife had a little segment on TV, and guess what she was doing? They talked to her about his candidacy in her kitchen, pouring the batter onto the griddle of pancakes. No fancy woman there. This is a stand by your man woman. Stand by your man. This is a stand by your man woman. And he's a man with a stand by woman. Remember when Hillary said she doesn't bake cookies? Well, what about the women who do bake cookies and spend all day with their kids in the kitchen trying to show them stuff and play with them and teach them the right way? How are they going to feel about Hillary? How are women who haven't gone straight ahead and achieved, even if they're happy in their own life, and not saying Hillary's is the better way to go, but how many may resent that someone would just go off on her own and try to be what she wants to be? I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of, and then of course many people criticize that she stayed with Bill when he was not faithful to her, and many women may or may not realize, although sex is the weapon in the bedroom, you know, you see on the sitcoms all the time that if the man won't do something for the woman, she says, oh yeah, we'll see what happens in the bedroom tonight, okay? So sex as the weapon, even though these kinds of things are maybe dynamics in people's lives, I think I just lost my train of thought there, but back to what I was saying, which is the women at home with kids who do bake cookies and who do stand by their man and who do have to deal with all the issues that women typically deal with, who don't have the enlightened equal partnerships with men, may not be too keen on full-blooded brazen females. I was thinking about who else has been full-blooded and brazen as a female in this country. And the ones that come to mind are Bella Asbug and Shirley Chisholm. And even now, I can't remember her name at the moment, but the representative from the Los Angeles area is quite her own woman, and boy, does she take guff for it. She takes a lot of grief for it. But anyway, when I'm looking around and I hear women say, oh no, they can't stand Hillary, they can't get into it, they can't imagine someone like Hillary, I'm like, where have I been all these years? What has life been doing all these years? I guess I'm from another planet, and maybe some of you will agree. Now, even if you recall too that during one of McCain's speeches, somewhere in one of the states a while ago, a woman, a fellow creature woman said, how can we defeat the bitch? Imagine that, ladies. That is painful. Why should any woman say that about a woman? I ask you, how can we defeat the bitch? She doesn't have to like her, she doesn't have to, but this is the dynamic of the resentment, the loathing, maybe the self-hatred, if we want to put it that way. And of course we know about the words that are used for women, bitch, whore, and you know, really it's its whole own subject, but what's really going on, especially to the young women out there and all the women that are on the market, so to speak, and everything, really, generally speaking, though not in every case, of course, but generally speaking, what you really have is the male gets to F you. This is what you have going on. And he can see through you and beyond you. He knows what he wants. He's built that way. Can I fault him? No, he's built that way, all that testosterone. So this is still the climate in which you're living. And you may doll it up and you may get around it with some fancy shenanigans. I remember once on Seinfeld when Elaine had that boyfriend that was so blasé. He painted himself for the football games, his naked chest and so on. And they had fights all the time. So she says, this is it. We're breaking up. From now on, we're only going to have sex. And he says to her, that's great, because I never did go for that dinner stuff anyway. And believe me, women, dinner as the prelude, or dinner as the ticket, dinner as the entry. Of course, a lot of males and women are willing today to go right ahead. They don't need any entries. They don't need any dinners. They don't need anything. They feel they should take whatever they can get, and the male is out to get whatever he can get. And this is especially to the younger women, and we won't get off on that, but it's certainly not the way to be handing yourself over time and again. And believe me, the first cut is the deepest, and that pain will remain. And sometimes that pain comes out as a child out of your vagina. That pain will remain. Now, women are, we're running out of time, so let me just go to some of the other parts of this that I wanted to bring out. You remember this song by Sandy Posey. She says, it makes no difference if you're rich or poor, or if you're smart or dumb. A woman's place in this old world is under some man's thumb. And if you're born a woman, you're born to be hurt. You're born to be stepped on, lied to, cheated on, and treated like dirt. And if you're born a woman, you're born to be hurt. A woman's lot is to give and go on giving. A woman's got to love and lose and go on living. Well, I was born a woman, I didn't have no say. And when my man finally comes home, he makes me glad it happened that way. No price is too great to pay. Yes, I was born a woman, I'm glad it happened that way. That's a far cry from Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth in the mid-19th century. That's a far cry. But if that ain't the truth, and you see, in the end, she's happy for the lot that she has. She's born to be stepped on, lied to, cheated on, and treated like dirt. And you know, I listened to a jazz singer called Dakota State, and she has a record called Crazy, I don't know the exact name, standard jazz tune, and it's so beautifully done by her, but I can't bear to listen to it because she talks about, to the man who comes to her house late at night, don't say a word, just hold me. Don't explain. Don't explain is the name of it. Don't explain. This is too garbagey for me to listen to the lyric. Don't explain. You know, you're here and I want to make the most of it. Don't explain. I'm so in love. And this is what we settle for. Now, another thing I will read to you briefly is something written by a male, which really shows the dynamic that still exists in all of our psyches together, the collective psyche, the individual psyche. What's deep down inside of us, just the way you see things exploding all around, like you never knew what happened, the future erupting in ways you never knew would happen. This is what the guy says. He says, bitches, these facts we consider self-evident. You know, bitches. People, even women say to each other, bitch. Huh? Huh? I never use that word, except to maybe explain something. Women have vaginas, and he uses the C word instead. Therefore, they are vaginas, but he uses the C word. Lying to a woman doesn't really count because they don't count as people. At some point, every woman has dreamed about being a hooker, and that may be in our psyches. Masochistic sex, if you will. Women are objects. Every girl over the age of 16 deserves a good anal pounding, even if it's rape. And you remember Howard Stern, and Howard Stern's a very interesting character. Nevertheless, you know how much he talked about anal poundings and how he was with women who were forced, if they were going to appear on his show virtually, unless they were so important, he could only riddle them with sexual commentary, but all the others absolutely had to strip for him. And then it became that the women were only too happy to strip for him. And then it became all the women in Daytona Beach wanted to show their breasts and let the boys screw them, F them, whatever other words we know, they're not pretty. And then he says, how to train your whore. Housekeeping. Women have inferior brains when compared to men. This is why their main job in life is to do the laundry, dishes, and other chores. When you're first breaking your new whore in, always use the threat of rape and violence to enforce your authority over her. And you know that this is coming undone now with all the domestic violence. Make sure she has plenty of cover-up makeup and large sunglasses for those days you forget to take your rings off. True history. True history goes on today. Because most women are illiterate, I suggest you take a picture of your home and how you like to see it, tape it to the kitchen floor right next to the dog bowl so that every time she's thirsty, she'll be reminded of her duties in life. Sex. This one should be self-explanatory. It's important to start training your whore early in life. Tie her up, punch her in the tits a little, use large rough objects as anal probes. This is all pretty normal stuff. Remember to instill in her at an early age that she is nothing more than a sperm dump. And believe me, ladies, that's what you are. And sometimes a baby comes out of that. That's what you are. And rear end pounding should be given at least twice a week. Forced sex or rape, as the Christians like to call it, should occur more often. Don't forget the value of random beatings. They work great. When in public, keep your whore on a tight leash. Remind her frequently to shut the F up. Their mouths aren't communication devices, they're sperm vacuums. If your whore starts to put on weight, lock her up in the basement with a bowl of water and a bucket to pee in. If the need arises, only give her one bucket. Trailer trash whores with young daughters are great. Start beating the younger whore around the age of 10. When the mother gets raped out, kill her and dump the body. Continue onwards with your new whore and repeat as required. Said somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also said, unfortunately, still existing deeply, squarely, strongly, firmly in the psyche of us as a human race. Well, we are coming very close to coming down. And what would be nice to see? What did I ever witness only once in my whole lifetime? Once. The yin and the yang, where men and women, of course, women have to get through getting on with women on an even keel as well, just as human beings, but men and women getting along evenly, each having their differences. Maybe the woman likes to nurture, maybe the man likes to cut shrubs, or whatever it is. But getting along with mutual adoration and respect, not one being, basically coming alive when he's aroused sexually, and not very much for that, because we know all the jokes about foreplay, we know all the jokes about the man falling asleep right after sex, we know all that, we know how the women starve to be attended to around the house for their way of being thrilled and chilled by their partner, but mostly that's not what's happening. And women need to be adored, women need to be thought of as something really fabulous, and then maybe they like to wait on and help the men. That may be in the natural order of things, but there has to be an evenness where each human being is allowed to flourish, and each human being is regarded and cherished and felt to have worth, both men and women. And we've yet to see brains and beauty come together in the same package and pass through the eye of the needle. If you've got brains, that's what you're thought of. Kirkpatrick from the UN. If you've got beauty, then you're considered. That one that died, I forgot her name.
Anna Nicole
I liked
Smith.
her very much. I didn't like the saga that ensued. That was kind of trashy. But she was very smart, even though she was not educated per se in a college and so on. She was a very smart lady, but we don't remember her. We don't understand the brain she had behind it, even though she wanted to be the way she was. And she and Madonna are close to fulfilling being, and Mae West being ways that they want to be. They'll be just that way, and they won't have any shame about it, and they really will hold their destiny in their own hands the way they want to be, playing the circumstances for what they have to contend with. Now, we want to remember, before we leave today, that's all I'll say on women. There's so much more to say. This whole Madonna whore. On the one hand, old mother and Mary and virgin and sweet and angelic, and then whore, bitch, screw job, so forth. The latter being by far more prevalent and coexisting with the former, and way more the case. All right, so now we just want to say a few words for the animals. I'm done with the women for now. That it's very sad, boy, late at night I think, and I'm not doing enough for the animals, so I should fault myself. But we are decimating them by not giving them places to live. And some of you may say, oh, I've got raccoons bothering me eating garbage, and I've got, birds coming and making a mess on my porch and so on. But sooner or later you'll get rid of them, as everybody will, as we sprayed the beehives. Poor bees in there all alive. I've seen people just spray them, and there was nothing I could do to stop it, and just kill off these beautiful organized colonies of creatures that help us and are so great and inspirational and so evolved over many years, and now we don't have enough bees. Well, we're going in for some very serious times with food, water shortages, and so on. But anyway, Even though we might think we've got nuisance pets and animals around the neighborhood, we get rid of them, and we get rid of them, and we tear down more land, and we put up more highways, and we are decimating animals by not specifically giving them a place to live. The salmon aren't running anywhere near like they used to in the rivers out west. Another thing is all the pit bulls that are being discarded in the animal shelters. Please don't do pit bulls. They are trained by genetics, by history, to be the animals that they are. And even when people think they're very soft and sweet and good to their own family, they may sometimes just break loose and have that automatic response come into play. And then what happens? The poor things, they are fantastic creatures, end up being put down. They're filling the animal shelters. We should be moving away from keeping pit bulls as domestic pets. And we should be getting away from keeping iguanas as pets. They're all over Florida now because they get too hard to handle in the house, so they let them loose. They let alligators loose in Central Park. We should be getting away from exotic pets, and don't buy your pets at a pet store or a puppy mill. Go to the shelters and get your animals from the shelter, please. Now, corporations run the animal research, and we have to be as much against the corporations, as much aware and onto what the corporations are doing to ruin our lives, including the strict structure, straitjacket of total control between technology and corporations. We must be onto that. There's also such a thing when you buy meat as a stamp called Animal Welfare Approved, which is the best standard for treatment of animals that will be slaughtered for meat that is in existence today in this country. So go to your grocer and say, I'd like to see Animal Welfare Approved on my meat supply. And we have to also watch how prices are escalating. Don't be fooled that there's no inflation. Talk about famines that are coming around the corner. Okay, recycle all your paper. All this paper I'm using is recycled. And recycle your plastic bags. And let's have one language, English. It's getting very weary trying to get things done with multiple languages. That's getting very tired, very fast. And get rid of plastic. If you don't want to have cancer, we've got to be on an agenda to rid ourselves of all the cancer-causing things in the environment. And I'm going to say good afternoon to you. Thank you for listening. From one angry woman to the audience out there, I hope it's a little light, not just heat. Merci, au revoir.